Hi, I'm Jeff from Chandler Systems, and today we're going to talk about the most common questions that we get from homeowners about water softeners. So maybe you just got your first softener, or maybe you just bought a house and you found this thing in your basement and you have never had a softener before and you want to know what to do. People call us all the time and they want to know, what does it need? What do I do? Really, assuming that the time of day is set correctly and it's cycling as it should and functioning properly, those are things we can cover in other videos. But assuming it's doing everything it needs to do, there's no regular maintenance that you need to do aside from just adding salt to the brine tank as needed. So this leads into a few other questions. So first of all, this is the brine tank. So this is the softener tank, or sometimes we call it the resin tank because it contains a media called cation resin. This is the brine tank. So this is just a storage tank for salt that's used to regenerate the softener resin. So as far as how much to add, it really doesn't matter. You just pour it in there. The amount of salt in the brine tank really has no bearing on the amount of salt the softener is going to use. As long as there is some salt in there, there's enough. So people always want to know, what kind of salt do I need to use? And it really doesn't matter. As long as it says that it's made for water softeners, it's going to be pure enough. It's not going to harm your water softener. But there's three most common kinds that you're going to run into are a blue bag, a green bag, or a yellow bag. And this is pretty standard whether it's a store brand like these or Morton or Diamond Crystal or some other brand. They all usually use the same color coding system, which is handy. So the blue bag is often called crystals or solar salt, and this is just natural salt. They evaporate seawater, and what you have left behind is sodium chloride. So when it comes to the pellets, or in this case they're called cubes, you usually have a green bag or a yellow bag. The yellow bag is just straightforward sodium chloride pellets. It's just in a pelletized form instead of a crystal. The green bag is just like that, but with an additional resin cleaning agent added to it. This is most commonly recommended for softeners that are taking out a little bit of iron or manganese. So if you have iron in your water and you're using your softener to remove iron, you don't have an iron filter in front of your softener doing that, you'll want to use the green bag. It's beneficial. It's going to help keep your resin clean. It's going to help remove that iron from sticking to your resin. If your softener is just removing hardness and it's not dealing with iron or manganese, there's no benefit to using the green bag, so you're better off just going with the yellow bag or the blue bag. There is a little bit of cost difference. Usually the green bag's $3 or $4 more. The yellow and blue are going to be pretty similarly priced. Now there's one other kind of salt that you're going to run into, that's potassium chloride. I didn't buy a bag of that. It's harder to find. It's also about 4 times the cost of these. So that's a much less popular option for obvious reasons. But if you, for environmental reasons or health reasons, don't want to use sodium to regenerate your softener, you can use potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. So you might see that as well if you're at the checkout aisle at your hardware store and you see the different kinds of salt to choose from. Those are the most common options that you'll find. So as far as how much salt to add, you can just go ahead and fill it up. Some people advise against filling it too full. They'll say just keep it above the water or only fill it 2/3 full. The reason they would tell you this is because they're concerned about it possibly solidifying or bridging up, as we call it. If it solidifies, then it can't reach the water and it causes problems. But really, as long as you're not filling it above the brine well here, which is the top of this white cylinder inside the brine tank, you can go ahead and fill it up 2/3, 3/4 of the way, that's fine. As far as when to add more, the rule of thumb is if it gets to where you see water, go ahead and add salt. That's just a rule of thumb. You could add more salt at any time, just don't run it out. Check it periodically and make sure that there's always some salt in there. So this leads to our next question. People look in there, they might see water, they might not see water. So people always ask, how much water should be in my brine tank? Should there be water in my brine tank? They might have a lot of water and they think it's too much, or they might be concerned that they don't see any. This will kind of depend on how your softener is set up. Some softeners have a function called pre-fill, meaning it fills the brine tank only at the beginning of a cycle. So if you look in there and see no water, it could be because you have plenty of salt. Really, if there's plenty of salt in there, you shouldn't see the water level. Or it could be because you have pre-fill enabled. This will depend on what type of softener you have and how it's set up. Now, if you do see water, it's also not a concern unless it's really high. So looking in the brine tank and seeing water can be normal if you have a fairly low level of salt. That's usually a sign now is a good time to add more salt. But If you look in there and the salt's halfway full or so and the water level's all the way up to the float, this could be a sign that the brine tank is overfilled, maybe due to a suction issue with a softener, a lack of brine draw, or some other issue. On most softeners, most brands of softeners, the brine float inside the brine tank is just a safety shutoff in case of a malfunction. So some people look in there and they're concerned that the water isn't touching the float. They think there's not enough water. There should be very little water in your brine tank generally. If it's up to the float, this signifies that there's a problem. Another common question we get is, especially with people that haven't had soft water before, you notice it feels different. It feels slippery. Some people perceive it as feeling kind of slimy. This can be shocking. Some people love it. Some people really hate it. So we get calls often about softeners being too soft. They say, my water softener is working too well, but they don't put it that way. But they say, my water is too soft. How do I make it less soft? And I'll tell you what you don't want to do. A lot of people get into the settings and they think, I'm going to change the hardness setting or I'm going to change the salt setting and this will affect the softness. And you don't want to do that. It'll only cause problems. And we could talk about why that is in another video. But basically, if you feel that your water is too soft, part of it might just be because you're going from having hard water to soft water, and that could be a big change. There's a lot of factors that play into this, including your raw water hardness, your alkalinity, your pH. These are all going to affect how drastic the change is, as well as how you perceive the feel of the water and the way that it interacts with soap. But bottom line, if you would like to maintain a consistent amount of residual hardness in your treated water lines for whatever reason, you don't want your water to be completely soft, you want it to be a few grains hard, maybe because you like it or for some other reason. The only way to really do that consistently isn't with changing settings in the head or salt usage or anything like that. You really have to mix a small amount of raw water back into your treated water lines. So the reason being, when water goes through the softener, if the softener is working properly, doing its job, it should make the water soft. It should be hard going in, it should be soft going out. And so no amount of changing of settings is going to give you a consistent level of residual hardness. It'll be soft and then hard. If you want it to be consistently a low level of hardness, you just need to mix back in some raw water. So I'll show you how you can do that. So on our softener here, if you're looking at it from the back, the water's coming in on the left-hand side and it's coming out on the right. So the simplest way to dial in a small amount of hard water to bypass the softener is just to turn this outlet valve about 45 degrees. And this will allow some water to bypass the softener and some water to go through the softener. A better way would be if you want a long-term amount of hardness to stay in your lines, you could plumb a line in between the inlet and outlet and put a valve that you could turn to dial it in a little more specifically. But short term, if you just turn it partially, this is going to allow some of the water to bypass the unit. For some people, they'll do this for a period of time and get used to that and then turn it back, and that will gradually ease you into having soft water. But if you just always want to have some hardness in your water, doing this or plumbing a line in between the inlet and outlet would be your best bet. So finally, the last question that we often get is, how do I know if this softener is working? If your water isn't very hard and you don't have any other issues like iron or manganese, it might be pretty subtle, the difference between hard water and soft water. So really the only way to really know if it's working and how well it's working would be to test your water. But there are some signs to look out for. It should be using salt. It might not use very much. It might only use 9 pounds every week or two, but the salt should be going down fairly consistently, assuming that your water usage is consistent. So if all of a sudden it's not using salt, or if the water level in the brine tank gets a lot higher, or if it suddenly is using way more salt than what it typically uses, these would all be signs of issues. But if it's cycling, the time of day is correct, you may or may not hear it running because it runs in the middle of the night. But if you hear it running, the time of day is correct, the water level is consistent, typically invisible because you have plenty of salt in there and you can't see the water level. And if it is using salt over time, you can rest assured it's most likely working. But again, if you want to verify that, really the best way to do that would be to do a lab test and see if it's removing your hardness or not. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you'd like to see more content like this, just drop a comment below and let us know what you'd like to see. Thanks.